Hello, and thank you for allowing this moment for yourself. You can let go of all focus now. Just allow your attention to soften, as my voice gently carries you to a place of rest, a place where we find the story of a city that was loud, and messy, and wonderfully complicated like human. We are drifting back through time to medieval London. There's no need to understand its politics or memorize its kings. We are just going to walk its streets and breathe its air and see what we can see. Before we drift too far, if you feel a connection to this place, you're welcome to leave a quiet like or subscribe. Think of it not as a task, but as leaving a soft footprint in the dust of a long-forgotten road, a small sign that you pass this way on your journey inward. And if you feel so inclined, you can leave a comment with your city and the time of night where you are. It's always nice to know who we're sharing the quiet with, and so find that gentle darkness in your room, perhaps with a soft blanket pulled a little closer as we begin our slow drift into tonight's tale. Our journey doesn't begin in a castle or a cathedral, but on a muddy road, looking at the only way into the city from the south, the bridge. Before you stands London Bridge. And you should probably take a moment to forget everything you know about what a bridge is supposed to look like. This is not a simple span of stone or a graceful arch of steel. This is a living street miraculously suspended over the churning, brown water of the River Thames. It's a chaotic, teetering, magnificent mess. From here, it looks like a whole neighborhood has been precariously glued on top of 19 stone arches. It's crammed with houses for stories high, their upper floors jutting out so far over the water, they almost seem to kiss the houses on the other side of the narrow lane. Shops are wedged in between them, their painted signs swinging in the damp breeze. It's the city's great artery, and its only southern entrance, and right now, it's pulsing with life. You take a deep breath, which might be a mistake as the air is thick with the smells of wood smoke, damp earth, and the river itself, and you take your first step onto the wooden planks. The whole structure seems to vibrate under the weight of 100 carts, the clatter of hooves, and the shuffling feet of 1,000 Londoners. You are immediately swallowed by the crowd. People push past you, shouting greetings, making deals, arguing over the price of eels. A merchant yells from his shop window, trying to sell you a woolen cap. A child chases a hoop, narrowly avoiding the wheels of a rumbling wagon. To live on this bridge, you think, would be to never know a moment's peace. To have the constant thrum of the city passing through your living room and the dark, swirling water of the Thames as your basement. As you shuffle along, squeezed between a fat friar and a woman carrying a basket of live chickens, you try to look up. The timber-framed houses lean over you, their windows like eyes watching the endless procession. They block out most of the sky, turning the bridge into a long, dark tunnel. Every so often, a gap between the buildings reveals a dizzying glimpse of the river below, its surface rushing unfoaming around the thick stone piers, known as starlings. The sound of the water is a constant, threatening roar beneath the human chaos. Historians will one day call this bridge one of the wonders of the medieval world, and you can see why. It feels less like an act of engineering and more like an act of sheer, stubborn willpower. You pass the very center of the bridge where a beautiful stone chapel stands, a tiny island of sacred calm in the middle of all this profane noise. It's dedicated to St. Thomas Becket, the Archbishop murdered in Canterbury, a man whose pilgrimage route many are traveling. Some people pause here, crossing themselves before continuing on their way. It's a reminder that even in the most crowded and worldly of places, faith finds a foothold. But as you approach the southern end, the Southwark side, the mood shifts. Looming over you is the stone gate, the formal entrance to the city for those arriving from the south, and perched atop its battlements are decorations. Long dark poles are angled towards the sky, and on the end of each is a blackened, vaguely spherical object. You squint. At first, they might be mistaken for strange birds' nests or oddly shaped lumps of coal. But then you see the crows circling and landing, and you understand. These are heads, boiled in water, dipped in tar for preservation, and stuck on pikes as a grim welcome mat. It's a rather unsubtle piece of public art by the Crown, a warning to any would-be traitors about the price of ambition. It's a strange and unsettling sight, yet the people around you barely seem to notice. It's just part of the scenery. You pass under the gate, beneath the silent gaze of those tarred heads, and step off the bridge. And instantly you feel a change. The air is different. The air is different. The air is different. The ground beneath your feet is softer, muddier. The authority of the City of London, with its guilds and its mayor and its strict rules, ends at that gate. You are now in Southwark. This place is what's known as a liberty, a district with its own special jurisdictions and laws. Historians will argue for centuries about the precise legal distinctions, but for you, right here, right now, the difference is simple. The leash is off. The noise is louder, more raucous. The smells are earthier, a potent cocktail of breweries, tanneries, and something else. Something you can't quite place. It's a scent of wood smoke, yes, but also of hot water, steam, and a strange, floral perfume that seems to be fighting a losing battle against the smell of damp, woolen, and washed bodies. You've crossed the bridge, and in doing so, you've crossed into another world entirely. The ground beneath your feet tells the story. On the London side of the bridge, the roads were at least attempting to be solid, paved with stones in the wealthier parts packed down by centuries of traffic. Here in Southwark, you're walking on a slurry of mud, straw, and things you'd rather not of mud, straw, and things you'd rather not identify. It's quell chess with every step, a constant, greedy sound trying to pull the shoes from your feet. You are officially off the city's leash, and the very earth feels untamed. And then there's the air. The smells you've left behind on the north bank were those of a dense, crowded city, wood smoke, baking bread, incense from 100 churches, and the general, pervasive aroma of too many people living too close together. The air here is different. It's thicker, richer, and somehow more industrial. You begin to walk down the high street, and it's as if you're passing through invisible clouds of scent, each telling a different story of Southwark's unique character. First, you're hit by a wave of something warm, sweet, and malty. It's the comforting, yeasty smell of brewing. You see the source almost immediately, a large wooden building with steam billowing from a high vent. This is a brewery, one of many in Southwark. The water from the wells on this side of the river is famously better for making ale than the Thames water itself. And a whole industry has sprung up to quench London's insatiable thirst, a promise of a warm hearth and a full tankard. But it doesn't last. Just a few dozen yards further on, the malty sweetness is brutally murdered by a new smell. This one is sharp, acrid, and deeply unpleasant. It's the chemical stench of a tannery, the place where raw animal hides are turned into leather. Piles of stiff, slimy skins are stacked outside, attracting clouds of buzzing flies. The smell is a complex assault on your nostrils, the raw decay of animal flesh mixed with the biting ammonia of stale urine, which you learn is used to loosen the hair from the hides. Scribes and historians will later confirm the truly foul ingredients of the trade, including vats of dog dung used to soften the leather, a process called puring. The price of a good pair of shoes, you realize, is a powerful gag reflex for anyone living downwind. You walk faster, breathing through your mouth, wondering how anyone could get used to such a smell. You escape the tannery's grasp only to be enveloped by a different kind of funk. It's the smell of animals, but not farm animals. It's a musky, feral scent, mixed with the metallic tang of blood and the sour smell of fear. You hear a roar, not human, followed by the barking of dogs and the cheering of a crowd. You peer down a muddy lane and see a large wooden arena, a bear-baiting pit. Southwark is London's playground, a place for the entertainments deemed too noisy, too smelly, or too sinful for the city proper. This is where you come to watch a chained bear fight a pack of dogs to the death. It is a brutal, popular pastime, and its smell of caged beasts, unspilled blood hangs heavy in the air. This whole district, you begin to understand, is a repository for everything the official, pious City of London wants to keep at arm's length. The industries that pollute, the entertainments that corrupt, the people who don't quite fit in. City officials would tell you this place, the liberty of the clink, is a lawless nest of thieves and vagabonds. Yet, as you watch people go about their business, it doesn't feel entirely chaotic. It feels more like a place with its own rules, its own distinct culture. Historians will forever debate whether Southwark was a truly lawless free-for-all or simply a place that played by a different, unwritten rulebook, one enforced by powerful local figures rather than a distant mayor. And through it all, woven between the scents of beer, leather, and blood, is that other smell you first noticed when you stepped off the bridge, that strange, steamy, perfumed aroma. Now you can see its source. Dotted along the street are houses that look different from the breweries and workshops. They often have cheerful painted signs hanging outside, a swan, a bell, a cross of keys. Steam seeps from beneath their doors and from unglazed upper windows. It's a damp, warm smell, a mix of burning wood, hot water, and a heavy, almost desperate floral scent, as if someone is trying to cover up the smell of sweat and damp wool with a bucket of rosewater. You stop near one. The sound from within is a low murmur of voices, punctuated by a splash and a sudden burst of laughter. It smells of public laundry, but also of a tavern, of a sick room, but also of a party. It's a confusing, alluring, and slightly unnerving combination. This, you finally understand, is the smell of a stew house, a public bath, and you realize that in a place famous for its filth, the business of getting clean must be a very complicated, and perhaps very popular, enterprise indeed. The question that hangs in the steamy, perfumed air is a simple one. What exactly are they washing away in there? Before you ever think of stepping into a house, you hear about them. The name itself is a whisper, a joke, or warning, depending on who is speaking. In the crowded taverns of London proper, sober merchants will talk of the stews of Southwark as a necessary evil, a place to let off steam, so to speak. They say it with a wink and a nudge, their conversation laced with innuendo. They speak of the fine, hot baths that can soothe the aches of a long week in the saddle or hunched over a counting desk. They praise the barbers who work within, who can give you the closest shave and trim your beard in the latest fashion. But their eyes betray another story, a story about the other services on offer. Young apprentices, flush with their first meager earnings, speak of the stews in hushed, excited tones. For them it is a rite of passage, a forbidden fruit hanging just across the bridge. They trade exaggerated stories of the women who work there, the Winchester Geese, painting them as either impossibly beautiful sirens or tragic, fallen angels. They talk about the food and drink you can have brought right to your tub, a luxury they can only dream of. Their stories are a blend of youthful bravado and nervous curiosity. To them, the stews are a symbol of a forbidden adulthood, a place where the rules of normal life are suspended in the steam. The priests, on the other hand, talk about the stews from the pulpit, their voices thundering with condemnation. They call them pits of sin, dens of iniquity, a moral plague upon the city. They warn that the hot waters of the bath are a slippery slope to the fires of hell. They tell tales of good men lured to their ruin, of fortunes squandered, of souls lost to momentary pleasure. Yet, even as they preach against them, their very condemnation gives the stews a powerful, almost mythical status. By painting them as so exquisitely sinful, they make them all the more tempting to a certain kind of person. And then there are the women. Not the women who work in the stews, but the wives of the merchants, the mothers of the apprentices. They speak the word stews with a quiet bitterness. They see the money that disappears from the household accounts, the husbands who come home late, smelling faintly of perfume and wine. They hear the whispers and they know the score. For them, the stews are a source of betrayal and anxiety, a physical manifestation of a world of male privilege that they are utterly excluded from. It's a place that threatens the stability of their homes and the sanctity of their marriages. You also hear the practical whispers. People complain about the cost, the crowds, the risk of having your purse stolen while you soak. There are dark rumors too, stories of men who went into the stews for a hot bath and came out with a cold, a fever, or worse. An old woman at a market stall tells you it's madness to share a tub with a dozen strangers. You go in to wash off your own dirt, she mutters, sorting through a pile of onions, and you come out wearing everyone else's. That a place of cleansing could actually be a place of contagion is a strange and disturbing one. Historians, centuries from now, will debate whether medieval people truly understood germ theory, but this old woman's folk wisdom suggests a powerful, intuitive understanding of the risks. They might not have known about bacteria, but they knew about filth. One of the most curious things you learn is about the name itself. Why stews? Some say it's because the bathhouses were originally attached to the fish ponds, or stews, of the Bishop of Winchester's palace, a fact we will come back to. Others claim it has nothing to do with fish at all. They say it's from the old French word d'estuve, which simply means a steam bath or a heated room. It's a linguistic puzzle that scholars will pick at for ages. But for the people of London, a stew is a place of hot, murky water where all sorts of things simmer just below the surface. So you gather these stories, these fragments of reputation, and you try to piece together a picture of what a stew house actually is. It is at once a spa, a tavern, a barbershop, a restaurant, a brothel, and a public health hazard. It is a place of sin decried by the church and a business licensed by that same church. It is a place of luxury for some and a place of desperate work for others. It is praised as a comfort for weary bodies and condemned as a trap for weak souls. The whispers paint a portrait of a place so full of contradictions that it seems impossible for it to exist. And this, of course, only makes you more curious to see it for yourself. The rumors have done their work. You have to know what's really going on in those steamy buildings on the south bank of the Thames. The time has come. You've heard the whispers, you smelled the strange, steamy air, and now you're going to see for yourself. You walk along Bankside, the main thoroughfare that parallels the river, the heartland of the Southwark district. The buildings here are a motley crew, a jumble of timber and plaster, but a few stand out. These are the stew houses, and you find yourself faced with a choice. There are, according to local gossip and later official records, about a dozen or so of these establishments licensed to operate in this specific area. They are right here on the main street, advertising their services openly. Each has a sign hanging from a metal bracket, creaking in the breeze. These signs are not just for decoration. In an age where most people can tread, a picture is the most effective form of advertising. One sign depicts a swan, its neck elegantly curved. This is the Swan, a well-known house. Does the name imply grace, or is it a nod to the birds that swim in the bishop's nearby ponds? Another sign shows a large, golden bell. The bell. Simple, effective. It suggests you can ring for service, that your needs will be answered promptly. A third sign shows a pair of crossed keys, the cross keys. This is a symbol of St. Peter, the gatekeeper of heaven. The irony of using a holy symbol to advertise a business known for its sinfulness is so blatant, it has to be a joke. It's a cheeky, defiant gesture, a perfect symbol for Southwark's irreverent spirit. You pause for a moment, trying to read the subtle clues. Do the different signs indicate different levels of quality, different specializations? Is the Swan more refined than, say, the Castle, whose sign looks a bit battered? Is the Bell known for better food than the Crane? There's no guidebook, no online reviews to help you. Historians will debate the exact number and names of these houses. Records are patchy and names changed over the years, but the most famous ones, like the Cardinal's Hat, the Boar's Head, and the Swan, will be remembered for centuries. You decide to walk past a few, just to get a feel for the clientele. From the door of the Boar's Head, a group of loud, red-faced men stumble out, singing a bawdy song. They look like dockworkers or maybe soldiers off duty. The vibe is rough and boisterous. From another, the Cardinal's Hat, you see a man in a fine fur-trimmed coat leaving alone, his face a mask of careful discretion. He looks like a wealthy merchant from the city, someone with a reputation to protect. There is a kind of hierarchy. Some stews are the equivalent of a rowdy pub, while others aim for a more exclusive, high-end market. A particularly strange detail you notice is that some of the houses have small, lattice windows. This seems counterintuitive. You'd think a business built on privacy would have solid walls, but the lattices serve a purpose. They allow steam to escape, and more importantly, they allow those inside to see out, but make it difficult for those outside to see in. They offer a one-way view of the world, a screen of semi-privacy. You see a silhouette in one of the windows, a woman's shape, there for a moment and then gone. You finally stop in front of one. Let's call it the Lamb. The sign is freshly painted, and the doorstep looks like it's been recently swept. It seems to be aiming for a respectable, or at least a less disreputable clientele. It feels like a safe bet. You take a deep breath, trying to steel yourself. This is it. You are about to step out of the relatively normal, muddy world of the Southwark street and into the hot, wet, and morally ambiguous world of the stews. You hesitate for a second. Is this really a good idea? The old woman's warning about coming out dirtier than you went in echoes in your mind. The thundering condemnations from the pulpit seem to hang in the air. But curiosity is a powerful force. This institution is a cornerstone of London life, a place of immense social importance, however notorious. To understand the city, you have to understand this place. You put your hand on the heavy oak door, vibrating slightly with the noise and energy from within. You push it open and are hit by a wall of heat and steam, a wave of noise and strange smells. You have made your choice. You are going in. The moment you push open the door to the lamb, your senses are ambushed. The first thing that hits you is the heat. It's not the dry heat of a fire, but a thick, wet, clinging heat that instantly mists your eyes and makes the cool air outside feel like a distant memory. It's like walking into a cloud. The air is heavy with steam, so dense you can barely see more than a few feet in front of you. Herbal scent of whatever fragrant herbs have been thrown into the tubs to try and mask the other, more human aromas. Your eyes adjust slowly to the dim, steamy light. The main room is large and cavernous, with a high, vaulted ceiling from which the steam gathers and drips like rain. The light filters in from the latticed windows you saw outside, casting hazy, shifting patterns on the damp wooden floor. They are huge circular wooden vats like oversized barrels, big enough to hold half a dozen people or more. There are several of them dotted around the room, each filled with steaming, murky water. The second thing that hits you is the noise. It's a cacophony. The primary sound is the sloshing unsplashing of water, but mixed with that is a constant hubbub of human voices. Men are laughing, shouting, singing. Their voices echo strangely in the steamy space, sounding both loud and muffled at the same time. There's the clatter of wooden cups on a tray, the high-pitched giggle of a woman, the low rumble of a business negotiation. This is not a quiet, contemplative spot. You stand there for a moment, dripping and uncertain, a stranger in a strange land. A man barrels past you, wearing nothing but a small linen cloth tied around his waist, his body red from the heat. He jumps into a nearby tub with a great splash, shouting a greeting to the men already soaking within. No one seems to pay you any mind. You are just another body, another customer. As you step further into the room, your feet sliding on the slick floor, you begin to make out the details. The walls are paneled with dark, damp-stained wood. Along one wall are rows of wooden pegs, where men have hung their clothes. You see expensive fur-lined cloaks hanging next to simple woolen tunics, a visual reminder of the mix of social classes that frequent this place. Some historians will argue that the Bathish was a rare place of social leveling, where a nobleman and a baker might soak side by side. Others contend that the social hierarchy was very much intact, even when everyone was half naked. You suspect the truth is somewhere in the middle. You might share a tub, but you probably know who's who. A figure emerges from the steam. It's a woman, but she's not one of the bathers. She is fully dressed, though her sleeves are rolled up and her apron is damp. She is one of the staff, a bath attendant or keeper. She gives you a practiced, weary look. "Here for a bath, sir?" She asks, her voice hoarse from shouting over the din. You nod, feeling foolishly overdressed. "That'll be a penny for the water," she says, holding out a hand. "Another penny if you want a private room. Your clothes go on the peg. We're not responsible for what goes missing." A penny. That's the price of a loaf of bread. Not cheap, but not extortionate either. It's the basic entry fee. The mention of a private room is interesting, so there are options for those who want more discretion, or perhaps are conducting more sensitive business. You hand her the penny, and she gestures towards an empty space on the wall. As you begin to unlace your tunic, you feel incredibly self-conscious, but then you look around. No one cares. The room is a strange tableau of medieval life, stripped down to its bare essentials. In one tub, a group of men are gambling, throwing dice onto a floating wooden board. In another, a man sits alone, his eyes closed, while a barber carefully scrapes a straight razor across his chin. Women, the Winchester Geese, move between the tubs. They are not bathing themselves. They are working. Some are scrubbing the men's backs with bundles of birch twigs, a practice thought to improve circulation. Others are serving ale in wooden mugs, wading into the chest-deep water to deliver the drinks. Their presence is both completely normalized and deeply charged. They are part of the service, as essential to the experience as the hot water itself. You finally strip down to your small clothes, hang your tunic and hose on a peg, and walk tentatively towards an empty spot in one of the tubs. The wooden lip of the vat is smooth and worn. You brace yourself and step in. The water is shockingly hot, but it quickly becomes a deep, bone-soaking warmth. The water itself, well, the less said the better. It's cloudy with bits of herbs and who knows what else floating in it. You make a mental note to put your head under. You've crossed the threshold, you've paid your penny, and now you are part of the scene, just another body simmering in the great, humid stew of Southwark. You settle into the hot, cloudy water, the initial shock giving way to a pleasant, muscle-loosening warmth. Your body is submerged, but your head is very much above water, and you start to observe the unspoken social choreography of the tub. You've found a spot in a large, circular vat with about 5 other men. There's a silent, immediate understanding of personal space, even in this deeply impersonal setting. You all keep a certain distance, a bubble of murky water between you. It's a bit like finding a seat in a crowded tavern. You acknowledge your neighbors with a slight nod, and then you respectfully mind your own business. The first rule you learn is about your belongings. Your penny got you into the water, but it didn't buy you security. Before getting in, you saw a man carefully wrap his small leather purse in his linen shirt and tuck it under his tunic on the peg. A wealthier-looking merchant had a young boy, probably an apprentice, standing guard over his more substantial pile of clothing. The attendant's warning, "We're not responsible for what goes missing," was not an idle one. The stews are notorious for petty theft. Thieves, known as FOS sets, are known to frequent these places, hoping to snatch a purse while its owner is distracted. You make a mental note that you were wise to only bring a single penny with you. The second rule is about refreshments. You don't have to get out of the tub for anything. A young boy no older than 12 scurries around the edge of the vats. Ale, wine, a small pie, he calls out, balancing a wooden tray precariously. A man in your tub, a burly fellow with a great deal of chest hair, flags him down. Ale for me, boy. He bellows, takes the man's coin, and soon returns with a wooden mug of dark, frothy ale. The man takes a long drink, sighing with satisfaction as he sinks deeper into the hot water. The idea of combining a hot bath with cold ale is undeniably appealing. It's the ultimate medieval relaxation package. Some of the more luxurious stews you've heard even have small wooden tables that float in the tubs, so you can rest your drink and your food without having to hold them. The third and most important rule you learn is about interaction. While some men are here to be social, many are here for a strange kind of public privacy. The men in your tub are a perfect example. The burly man is content with his ale. Another man, thin and weary, is leaning his head back against the rim, eyes closed, seemingly asleep. Two others are murmuring to each other in low tones, their heads close together. It's clear they are discussing business. The bathish provides a perfect cover for discreet conversations. The noise and steam swallow your words, and it's hard for anyone to casually overhear a conversation when they're sitting in a different tub across the room. It's a place where you can be anonymous, just another half-naked body in the steam. This is a key function of the stew house that often gets most scandalous reputation. It's a third place, somewhere that is neither home nor work, a place for men to network, to gossip, to make deals, or to simply escape from the pressures of their lives. It's the medieval equivalent of a pub, a coffee house, and a sauna all into one. Historians call this a crucial aspect of male social life in the period. The stew house wasn't just about getting clean or seeking out sin. It was about community and commerce. Then, one of the women approaches your tub. She's carrying a small wooden bucket with fresh, steaming water, and a bundle of what looks like leafy twigs. She gives a professional, impersonal smile to the group. "A scrub, sirs. Good for the blood." The burly man grunts in affirmation. He turns, presenting his broad back. The woman dips the birch twigs into the hot water and begins to whip them rhythmically against his skin. It looks painful, but the man just sighs, a picture of bliss. This is a form of massage, a way to stimulate the skin, and it was believed to sweat out impurities and balance the body's humors. You politely decline, and the woman moves on without a second thought. Her job is to offer a service, not to be persuasive. Watching her, you realize that the women navigate this space with a practiced, detached professionalism. They are experts at being both present and invisible, at fulfilling the roles of waitress, masseuse, and companion without crossing certain lines, unless, of course, a customer pays for those lines to be crossed. A delicate dance of public and private, of business and pleasure, of cleanliness and something else entirely. And you are right in the middle of it, soaking it all in. You're beginning to think you understand the rhythm of this place, the soaking, the drinking, the quiet business deals. But then you notice something that complicates the picture. A man in the tub next to yours is getting more than just a back scrub. HES getting a shave. A barber, identifiable by the distinctive striped pole at his trade, is leaning over the edge of the vat. The bather has his head tilted back, his neck exposed, while the barber expertly wields a long, glittering striped razor. It's a terrifyingly intimate sight. One slip, one sudden splash from a nearby reveler, and the consequence could be disastrous. Yet both men are perfectly calm. The barber, with his sleeves rolled high, is a picture of concentration. He scrapes away the foam and stubble, occasionally wiping his razor on a cloth tied to his belt. This is not just a bathish, it's a full-service grooming emporium. You could come in, filthy and unshaven after a long journey, and emerge an hour later, clean, smooth-faced, and ready for business or courtship. But the barbers here offer more than just a shave and a haircut. The striped pole of their trade has a grim, medical significance. The red stripe represents bandages. These men are not just barbers, they are barber surgeons. They are the general practitioners of the medieval world, and their services extend far beyond simple grooming. The man getting a shave could, if he wished, also ask the barber to pull a rotten tooth. You watch with a kind of morbid fascination as the barber finishes the shave, and then the bather opens his mouth wide. The barber peers inside, prodding with a small metal tool. You can't hear their conversation over the noise, but you can guess the topic. After a moment of discussion, the bather shakes his head, and the barber shrugs, packing away his tools. Apparently, the tooth gets to live another day. This practice of medical treatments in the bathish is deeply rooted in the prevailing theories of health. The dominant medical philosophy of the time is humoral theory, the belief that the body is governed by four fluids or humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Illness is thought to be caused by an imbalance of these humors. A hot bath was believed to open the pores and help you sweat out an excess of a bad humor. It was seen as the perfect place to undergo other treatments designed to rebalance the body. The most common of these treatments is bloodletting. And yes, it happens right here. In a quieter corner of the stew house, you see another barber surgeon at work. A man is sitting on a small stool, his arm extended over a wooden bucket. The barber has made a small incision in the man's inner elbow, and a thin stream of dark blood is trickling into the bucket. The patient looks pale but serene. He is willingly being drained of his vital fluids in a hot, steamy, and profoundly unhygienic room, in the firm belief that it is making him healthier. The barber watches the blood flow with a practiced eye, deciding when enough has been taken to rebalance his patient's humors. Historians still debate the efficacy of these treatments, with most concluding they did far more harm than good. But for the people of the time, it was cutting-edge medicine. You shudder at the thought. The combination of open wounds and shared, dirty bathwater seems like a recipe for disaster. It is a detail that adds another layer of profound weirdness to this place. You can get a beer, make a business deal, hire a companion for the night, and get a small portion of your blood drained, all without leaving the building. It's a one-stop shop for all your bodily needs, from the mundane to the medical, from the pleasurable to the perilous. The stew house isn't just ignoring the principles of modern hygiene. It's actively, enthusiastically doing the exact opposite of what any doctor would recommend. It's a wellness center that could, quite literally, kill you. And yet, business is booming. The water sloshes, the razors scrape, and the blood trickles, all part of a normal day at the Southwark tooth. As you sit in the tub, trying very hard not to think about bloodletting and floating teeth, a figure of authority emerges from the steam. HES, not a customer. He is fully, and rather richly, dressed in a dark woolen tunic and a belt with a large iron key hanging from it. His face is weathered but sharp, and his eyes miss nothing. He moves through the chaotic room with a sense of ownership, his gaze sweeping over the bathers, the staff, and the state of the tubs. This is the keeper of the stew house, the proprietor, the manager of this strange and complicated enterprise. He stops by your tub, not looking at the bathers, but at the water itself. He dips a finger in, tests the temperature, and then barks an order to a young boy stoking the fire in a far corner. More wood on the west burner. The boy scrambles to obey. This man is the captain of this steamy, chaotic ship, and he runs it with a firm hand. Being the keeper of a stew house is one of the most peculiar jobs in London. You are, on one hand, a legitimate business owner. You provide a service, hot baths, that is in high demand. You are a publican, serving food and drink. You are a host, managing a space for social gathering. You pay your rent, you hire staff, and you try to turn a profit. But you are also, undeniably, managing a house of ill repute. Your business operates in a permanent legal and moral gray area. You are constantly balancing the need to attract customers with the need to avoid the unwanted attention of the city authorities or the moral outrage of the church. You watch him work the room. He moves over to the two men who were negotiating a business deal. They had been speaking in low tones, but now they call the keeper over. He listens patiently, nods, and then says something that makes them both laugh. He is part diplomat, part bouncer. He has to be able to schmooze with the wealthy merchants, ensuring they feel welcome and secure, while also being tough enough to handle the drunken soldiers who might start a brawl. His survival depends on his ability to be all things to all people. His relationship with the women who work here is particularly complex. He is their employer, their landlord, and their protector all at once. He collects a significant portion of their earnings, but he also, in theory, keeps them safe from overly aggressive clients. You see him intervene when a bather gets to hands while with one of the women serving ale. He doesn't shout. He just puts a firm hand on the bather's shoulder and says something quiet and direct. The man, chastened, backs off immediately. The keeper's authority is absolute in this space. This role is a source of endless debate for historians. Were these keepers simply exploitative pimps, growing rich off the labors of the women they controlled? Or were they providing a necessary, if flawed, structure of safety and regulation in an otherwise dangerous profession? The records, often written by disapproving outsiders, tend to paint them as villains. But the reality was likely much more complicated. In a world with few safety nets for women, the keeper of a license might have been seen by some as the lesser of two evils compared to the dangers of working on the streets. One of the oddest parts of the keeper's job is dealing with his landlord. As you'll soon learn, the land on which these stews are built is owned by one of the most powerful men in England, the Bishop of Winchester. This means the keeper pays his rent not to a merchant or a nobleman, but to the church itself. So this man, whose business is publicly condemned from the pulpit every Sunday, has to maintain a professional, financial relationship with the very institution that calls him a sinner. You can only imagine the kind of mental gymnastics required to navigate that contradiction. The keeper finishes his rounds and heads towards a small, private office at the back of the building. He has to manage the accounts, order supplies of wood, ale, and fragrant herbs, and pay his staff. He has to decide when the water in the tubs has become so foul that it absolutely must be changed, a calculation based more on economics. Heating that much water is expensive than on hygiene. He is a shrewd businessman, a frontline manager in the messy, complicated business of human desire. He unlocks his office door with the big iron key, steps inside, and closes it, leaving the steam and the chaos behind for a few moments of peace. For him, this is not a party. It's just another long, loud, and hopefully profitable day at the office. The low, murmuring conversation you noticed earlier is starting to become clearer. The two men who had been talking quietly have now been joined by a third, and they've asked for a floating table for their drinks. As they talk, you realize they aren't just making idle chatter. They are deep in a negotiation, and the subject is wool. The price from the Cotswold is higher this season, says the first man, a portly merchant with a neatly trimmed beard. The clip was poor. My man in Norfolk's as well be lucky to get half the usual yield. That's what they always say, scoffs the second, a leaner man with shrewd eyes. He takes a sip of his ale. They say the clip is poor to drive up the price. They'll offer you 13 shillings a sack, not a penny more. The third man, who seems to be acting as a middleman, chimes in. 13 is fair, Thomas. You know the quality of his fleece. It's the finest in the market. 14 shillings, and he'll guarantee you 100 sacks before the next ship leaves for Calais. You are listening to the engine of the English economy humming away in a hot tub. The wool trade is the lifeblood of the kingdom, and these men are its arteries. They are haggling over prices, arranging shipments, and securing contracts, all while stewing in the same murky water as everyone else. The Bathish, you realize, is not an escape from work for everyone. For many, it's just a different kind of office. And it makes a strange kind of sense. Where else could you get this combination of privacy and public access? The steam and noise provide a cloak for their conversation, ensuring no competitor at the next table or in the next tub can easily listen in. Yet it's also a social space. They can conduct their business in a relaxed, informal atmosphere, lubricated by warm water and cool ale. It's networking. It fosters a sense of camaraderie and trust, or at least the appearance of it. Making a deal while you're both half-naked seems to imply a certain level of, well, if not honesty, then at least mutual vulnerability. You see other forms of commerce happening all around you. In another corner, a master craftsman, a goldsmith, by the look of his fine hands, is talking to a young man who is clearly not his apprentice. The young man is showing him something small and shiny that he palms from a pouch. A stolen bauble. A piece of raw material acquired through dubious means. The stew house is a perfect place for the black market to flourish, a neutral ground where respectable citizens can intersect with the less respectable underworld without causing a scene. This commercial aspect of the stews is something chroniclers of the time often noted, sometimes with admiration, sometimes with disdain. For some, it was a sign of the city's vibrant, irrepressible energy. For others, it was proof of the corrupting influence of money seeping into every aspect of life, leaving no space sacred. Why, they asked, must the business of the world follow you even into your bath? One of the more peculiar things you learned from listening in is the Bath's role in legal affairs. The middleman in the wool negotiation mentions something about needing a witness for their final agreement. He gestures to the barber surgeon, who is now just enjoying a soak after his work. Henry can witness it for us, he says. Because the stews were such a public gathering place, they often served as a venue for swearing oaths on witnessing contract. An agreement made in front of a dozen other bathers, and the keeper himself had a certain weight to it. It became public knowledge, harder to renege on later. There are even historical records of legal depositions and witness statements being formally taken in a Bathish. The practice seems utterly bizarre to a modern mind, but it highlights the central role these places played in the community. They weren't on the fringes of society in many ways, they were at its very center. They were a place where the lines blurred between public and private, leisure and work, legal and illegal. A place where a man could get a shave, sell 100 sacks of wool, and hire a witness for the contract all in the same afternoon. The wool merchants finally strike their deal. They agree on 13 shillings and sixpence. They call the keeper over, who brings them a small wooden board and a piece of charcoal. They scratch out the terms of their agreement, a strange, steamy contract. They all spit on their hands and shake, a common way to seal a deal. The middleman calls over the barber, who peers at the board and makes his mark as a witness. Business concluded. The merchant who drove the hard bargain grins and calls out to one of the women, "Another round of ale for my friends and I. We have a deal to celebrate. The business of the day is done. Now the pleasure can begin." As the wool merchants celebrate their deal, a new group of men enters the stew house, and their presence immediately shifts the atmosphere in the room. They are not merchants or craftsmen. They are dressed in the robes of the church. To our monks, their heads shaved in a tonsure, their brown habits already looking dark and heavy in the humid air. The third is a friar, his grey robe cinched with a simple rope belt. They move into the room with an air of practiced nonchalance, as if this is the most normal place in the world for them to be. You watch fascinated as they disrobe, folding their holy garments with care before hanging them on the pegs. Underneath they are just men like any other. They step into one of the tubs with sighs of pleasure, the hot water a welcome relief from the damp London chill. The other bathers barely give them a second glance. A few might offer a respectful nod, but there is no shock, no outrage. The sight of clergy in a Southwark stew is, apparently, completely unremarkable. This is, to put it mildly, a bit of a shock to you. You've heard the priests thundering against these places from the pulpit. You've been told they are dens of sin. And yet, here are men of the cloth, ready to soak in the very waters they condemn. The hypocrisy is so thick you could almost bottle it and sell it. One of the monks, a portly man with a cheerful red face, immediately flags down an attendant. "Wine, woman. The good French stuff if you have it," he calls out, his voice booming. He seems to be in a fine mood. The friar, a more ascetic-looking man, simply leans back and closes his eyes, a blissful smile on his face. This isn't a secret, shameful visit. They are here openly, enjoying the amenities just like laymen. The presence of clergy in the stews was a well-known open secret, a source of endless complaint for moral reformers and endless jokes for everyone else. Satirical writers and poets of the period, like Chaucer and Langland, delighted in creating characters of corrupt, worldly monks and friars who were more interested in worldly pleasures than in saving souls. The monk in the tub, calling for expensive wine, could have walked straight out of the pages of the Canterbury Tales. This sight would simply confirm their cynical view of the church as an institution that preached water but drank wine, often in a hot tub in a brothel. But why were they here? The reasons were as varied as for any other man. Some, undoubtedly, were there for the sinful pleasures that the moralists warned against. They were men with human appetites, and the stews offered a convenient and relatively discreet outlet. Historians have found numerous church court records detailing disciplinary actions against priests and monks caught in compromising situations in Southwark. The fact that these records exist proves that it was both happening and, at least officially, frowned upon. However, many historians argue that it wasn't always about sin. Monks and friars were human beings who got sore, tired, and dirty. Monasteries often had their own bathing facilities, but they were typically cold and functional. The public stews offered a level of comfort and luxury that was hard to find elsewhere. A monk with aching joints from too much time spent kneeling on cold stone floors would have found the hot water a blessed relief. Furthermore, like the merchants, they were part of the social fabric. A friar who traveled from town to town might use the stew house as a place to rest, to gather news and gossip that he could use in his sermons. And then there's the simple fact of human desire for company and relaxation. Life in a monastery could be rigid and monotonous. The stew house, with its noise, its laughter, its food and drink, was an escape. It was a brief holiday from piety. You watch as one of the Winchester Geese approaches the tub with the monks. She addresses the portly monk with a familiarity that suggests this is not his first visit. They share a joke, and he pinches her cheek. She laughs and wags a finger at him before moving on. The interaction is playful, normalized. It's clear that, in this little world, the rules are different. A man's robes, or lack thereof, don't change the fundamental nature of the place. Everyone is a potential sinner. The sight of these holy men, soaking on, drinking and flirting in a public bathish, is perhaps the ultimate symbol of the stew's contradictory nature. It is a place central to the city's social life that the church's own men cannot stay away. And as you are about to learn, their connection to this place is much, much deeper than a simple visit for a hot soak. As you continue to soak, The comforting aroma of baking bread and roasted meat begins to cut through the damp, herbal scent of the bathish. You realize you're hungry. As if on cue, the young boy with the tray of drinks comes by again, but this time his offerings are more substantial. Hot pies. Eel pasties. A bit of cheese, sirs, he calls out. The portly monk's eyes light up. Pies. What kind have you got, boy? Pork and apple today, father, the boy chirps. And a fresh batch of the eel pasties just came out. 2 of the pork and apple. The monk declares, tossing the boy a coin. And keep the wine coming. Soon, the pies arrive, served on a simple wooden platter that the monk rests on the edge of the tub. They are small, golden brown parcels of pastry, steam rising from a slit in the top. The monk takes a large bite, closing his eyes in ecstasy. The juxtaposition of a man of God, sitting half naked in a tub of murky water, devouring a meat pie with gusto, is a perfect miniature of the stewhouse experience. This is not a place of restraint. It is a place of indulgence. The bathish menu was a key part of its appeal. You didn't have to interrupt your relaxation to go and find food. The food came to you. This was the pinnacle of medieval convenience culture. The offerings were typically simple, hearty, and easy to eat with your hands. Pies were a staple. They were the medieval equivalent of fast food, a filling, a pastry crust, and a self-contained, portable meal. Fillings would vary by the season and what was cheap at the market: pork, beef, mutton, often mixed with fruit or spices to preserve the meat and mask any off flavors. Eel pasties were another Southwark specialty. The Thames was teeming with eels, and they were a cheap and plentiful source of protein for Londoners. They would be stewed, chopped, and baked into a savory pastry. To a modern palate, the thought of an eel pie might be a bit challenging, but to the men in this tub, it was a familiar and welcome comfort food. Besides the hot food, there were simpler snacks. A chunk of hard cheese, a hunk of dark bread, perhaps some roasted nuts or dried fruit. And of course there was the drink. Ale was the standard, the drink of the common man. It was thick, nutritious, and safer to drink than most water. For those with more refined tastes and deeper pockets, like our monk, there was wine, imported from France. It was a status symbol, a way to show off your wealth and sophistication even when you were wearing nothing but a linen wrap. But how did this all work? How do you run a kitchen in a bathish? The logistics are fascinating. Most stew houses had a kitchen on site, often in the back or on the ground floor. The fires used to heat the great cauldrons of water for the baths could also be used for cooking, an efficient use of fuel. The keeper of the stew would employ a cook, and the young boys who served the drinks would double as waiters, ferrying food and drink from the kitchen to the tub. This practice of eating in the bath has ancient roots. The Romans, famous for their grand public baths, also enjoyed snacking and feasting while they soaked. It's a tradition that speaks to a deep human desire to combine relaxation with sensory pleasure. However, it adds yet another layer to the questionable hygiene of the situation. Crumbs of pastry and drips of gravy would inevitably end up in the water, joining the shed skin, hair, herbs and other miscellaneous debris. It was a kind of communal soup. Some historians have humorously and perhaps accurately referred to it as people broth. This is a profoundly disgusting thought, but one that the bathers around you seem blissfully untroubled by. You decide to pass on the eel pasty for now, but the sight and smell of the food, the ready availability of ale and wine, the sheer, unapologetic hedonism of it all, helps you understand the powerful draw of this place. It was an experience. It was a place where you could soothe your aching body, quench your thirst, fill your belly, and surround yourself with company. It was a temporary escape from the hardships and restrictions of everyday life. For the price of a few pennies, you could feel like a king, feasting in his tub, with the world and its worries kept at bay by a wall of warm steam and the promise of another slice of pie. As the afternoon wears on, you become more accustomed to the rhythm of the stew house. You've seen men conduct business, get shaves, and eat their lunch in the tubs. You've seen monks enjoying their day off, and you have been constantly aware of the women who move through this world, serving drinks, scrubbing backs, and laughing with the clientele. Now, you begin to learn who they really are. A man in your tub, a talkative fellow who has introduced himself as a weaver, gestures with his chin towards one of the women. She's young, probably not yet 20, and is skillfully deflecting the advances of a drunken hand-why merchant. One of the Winchester Geese, the weaver says, his tone a mixture of pity and matter-of-factness. Poor girl. It's a hard life. Winchester Geese, you ask, feigning ignorance. Aye, he says, lowering his voice slightly. That's what we call them. The Bishop of Winchester's geese, because they work on his land. See, they're his tenants, in a manner of speaking. He says it with a wry smile, fully aware of the dark irony. The term goose itself was medieval slang for a prostitute, and being bitten by a Winchester goose was a euphemism for contracting a venereal disease. These women are the core of the stew house economy and its primary attraction for many of the men here. They are not independent agents. They are part of a highly regulated, officially sanctioned system of prostitution that is unique to this small patch of Southwark. They live and work in the stew houses, which are legally required to be their place of residence. They are, as the weaver said, tenants of the most powerful landlord in the area. And this is where the story takes a truly bizarre turn. The landlord is not a crime lord or a shady merchant. He is the Bishop of Winchester, one of the wealthiest and most powerful clergymen in all of England. His London residence, Winchester Palace, is just a stone's throw from where you are sitting. This entire district, this notorious square mile loves sin and liberty, falls under his jurisdiction as the Lord of the Liberty of the Clink. You try to wrap your head around this. The church, the very institution that preaches chastity and condemns lust as a deadly sin, is directly profiting from organized prostitution. The bishop is, for all intents and purposes, the stew houses. He collects the rent from the keepers. He sets the rules for how the businesses are to be run and how the women are to be managed. The money earned from this trade goes into the coffers of his bishopric. This fact was not a secret. It was common knowledge. Everyone in London knew about the bishop's connection to the stews. For most, it was just another example of the world's hypocrisy, a joke to be told over a pint of ale. For reformers, it was an outrageous scandal, proof of the deep corruption at the heart of the church. Historians continue to debate the bishop's motivations. Was it a cynical cash grab, pure and simple? Or was it, as some in the church might have argued, a pragmatic attempt to contain and control a trade that they knew they could never truly eradicate? By keeping it confined to one small area and placing it under their authority, were they performing a kind of public service, preventing it from spreading throughout the city? This argument, that they were regulating sin rather than endorsing it, is a weak one, but it's the most likely justification they would have used. They created a system of rules or ordinances that govern the stews, which we will get to. They created a world where sin was not just tolerated, but licensed, taxed and managed. Looking at the young woman, fending off the merchant with a tired smile, you see the reality behind the system. She is not a goose. She is not a goose. She is a human being, trapped in a bizarre and exploitative system sanctioned by the highest levels of society. Her life, her body, and her earnings are controlled by the keeper of the stew, who is in turn controlled by the bishop. She is the final cog in a machine that runs on male desire and clerical hypocrisy. The weaver was right, and the fact that her landlord is a man of God, whose palace stands in magnificent splendor just down the road, makes it all the harder and all the more strange. The weaver, your talkative companion in the tub, seems to enjoy his role as an insider guide. Seeing your interest, he leans closer, the steam swirling around his words. It's not just the rent, you see, he says, his voice a low, conspiratorial whisper. The bishop doesn't just take the money and look away. Oh no, he has rules. A whole list of them. They call them the ordinances for the stews. This is a stunning piece of information. The church isn't just passively profiting from this trade, it's actively managing it. The Bishop of Winchester, or at least his administration, has drawn up a detailed set of regulations that govern every aspect of the stew houses, from their business hours to the personal lives of the women who work there. It's as if a modern city council were to draft a precise and detailed rulebook for running a brothel. The weaver warms to his topic. They say a woman can't be kept in a stew against her will. He begins listing off the rules he's heard about, and the keeper can't stop her from leaving if she wants to. A fine idea, but I wonder how often that happens. This rule, which does appear in the historical ordinances, was likely a nod to the church's official stance against forced servitude, a legal and moral fig leaf to cover the exploitative nature of the business. Whether it was ever truly enforced is a major question for historians. And they're not allowed to work on the holy days, he continues. Christmas, Easter, the big feast days. The doors are supposed to be shut. The keepers hate that, of course. A holiday is a good day for business. This rule is another perfect example of the bizarre compromise at the heart of the stews. It was a way for the bishop to signal piety, to declare that sin must take a holiday when God is being honored. For the men in the tubs, it was probably just a minor inconvenience. The weaver takes a swig of his ale. The keepers aren't allowed to lend the women more than a few shillings either. 6 shillings and 8 pence, I heard. A nobleman's mark. The idea is to stop them from getting trapped in debt, but he trails off shrugging. This rule against debt bondage was, in theory, one of the most progressive. It acknowledged the danger of keepers trapping women in a cycle of debt they could never repay. But like the other rules, its enforcement was suspect. A desperate woman could always be convinced to take an off-the-books loan. Some of the most specific rules, as you will later learn from historical records, governed the women's daily lives. A woman was forbidden from being a shrew, from fighting with the other women or causing a disturbance. She couldn't wear an apron, a garment associated with respectable housewives, which was a clear attempt to visually distinguish these sinners from decent women. They were to be marked, set apart. And they can't have a man living with them, the weaver adds. No husbands, no pimps of their own. The keeper is their only master. This was a crucial rule for the bishop. It wasn't about the women's moral welfare. It was about protecting his own financial interests. By forbidding the women from having their own protectors or partners, the ordinances ensured that all the profits flowed upwards, from the woman to the keeper, and from the keeper to the bishop's coffers. It cut out the competition. These ordinances from 14th and 15th century England are a historian's dream, a rare and incredibly detailed window into the administration of the medieval sex trade. They are a profoundly strange document, a bureaucratic attempt to manage human sin. They are filled with a strange mix of pragmatic regulation, moral posturing, and naked financial self-interest. The very existence of these rules raises a huge question. Did they help or hurt the women they governed? On one hand, you could argue they provided a basic level of protection that was absent for women working on the streets. They had a roof over their heads, official limits on debt, and a theoretical right to leave. On the other hand, the rules reinforced their status as a class apart. They were micromanaged, their clothing was policed, and their earnings were controlled. The ordinances institutionalized their exploitation, making it clean, orderly, and, most importantly, profitable for the church. The weaver finishes his story. So yes, he concludes, the bishop has his rules. Makes him look like he's running a proper, orderly business, doesn't it? He chuckles into his mug. But at the end of the day, it's still the stews. The rules might be written on parchment in the bishop's palace, but here in the hot, steamy reality of the Bathish, they seem very far away indeed. The real law is the law of the keeper, and the law of supply and demand. The weaver's stories about the bishop's rules paint a picture of an orderly, if morally questionable system. But as you look around the steamy room, you begin to see the cracks in that carefully constructed facade. You see the hidden dangers and the quiet desperation that the ordinances could never truly regulate. The life of a Winchester Goose is a perilous one, and the greatest threats are sitting right here in the tubs beside you. Your attention is drawn to a scene unfolding in a far corner. A young woman, the same one you saw earlier, is trying to disengage from the drunken merchant. His laughter has grown louder, more aggressive. He grabs her by the wrist, his grip tight. "Just one more drink with me," he slurs, pulling her closer to the edge of the tub. The woman's professional smile has vanished, replaced by a flicker of genuine fear. She tries to pull her arm away, but he holds fast. For a moment, no one does anything. The noise of the bathish seems to swallow the small, tense drama. This is the everyday, constant risk of her profession, the client who won't take no for an answer, who believes his penny for a bath has bought him the right to do as he pleases. The ordinances might forbid a keeper from harming a woman, but they have less to say about the customers. Just as the situation seems about to escalate, the keeper appears, seemingly from nowhere. He doesn't raise his voice. He simply walks over, places a heavy hand on the merchant's shoulder, and murmurs something in his ear. The merchant's face darkens, and he glares at the keeper, but then he seems to think better of it. He releases the woman's wrist with a grunt of frustration. The woman gives the keeper a quick, grateful nod and disappears into the steam, melting back into her duty. The incident is over in seconds. The keeper has done his job as a bouncer, but you can't help but wonder what happens when the keeper isn't looking, or when the client is too powerful or too drunk to be reasoned with. Then there is the other, more insidious danger. It's a threat that is invisible, silent, and shared by everyone in the room. It's the water itself. You look down at the murky, lukewarm liquid you are sitting in. You've seen men with open sores from bloodletting. You've seen food dropped in it. And you know dozens of unwashed bodies have been in here before you. The herbal scents are fading, and you are becoming more aware of the water's soupy quality. This is the perfect breeding ground for disease. The hot, steamy environment is an incubator for every kind of bacteria and infection. The women who work here are particularly vulnerable. They spend hours a day in this water, their work often involving intimate physical contact with a succession of strangers. The bite of a Winchester goose, the cruel euphemism for venereal disease, was a grim reality. Syphilis had not yet arrived from the Americas, but other afflictions, from gonorrhea to rampant skin infections, were common. This danger was not entirely unknown to the people of the time. While they didn't understand germs, they understood contagion. They knew that sickness could be passed from person to person. And yet, they continued to flock to the stews. Why? The debate among historians is lively. Some argue that the desire for pleasure and social connection simply outweighed the perceived risks. Others suggest that in a world already filled with sickness and disease, the added danger from a public bath didn't seem so significant. Life was already a gamble. A trip to the stews was just one more roll of the dice. A curious and rather disgusting contemporary belief was that contracting a venereal disease from a prostitute could be cured by a subsequent encounter with a virgin. This piece of medical nonsense led to unspeakable tragedies and shows the deep confusion surrounding the transmission of disease. The young woman reappears, now serving ale to another tub. Her professional smile is back in place, but you can see the exhaustion in her eyes. She is navigating a world of constant, overlapping perils. The physical threat from aggressive clients, the economic threat of debt to the keeper, and the biological threat from the very water that defines her workplace. The ordinances of the Bishop of Winchester might provide a thin veneer of order, but they can't protect her from the fundamental dangers of her life. She is walking a tightrope every single day with no safety net below. The laughter and revelry of the stew house suddenly seems fragile, a thin mask covering a world of risk and quiet suffering. You've been in the water for what feels like a long time. The heat has seeped into your bones, and your skin is wrinkled like dried fruit. The initial novelty has worn off, replaced by a growing sense of unease. It's the water. The more you think about it, the more you notice. You noticed the herbs when you first got in, a fragrant, pleasant touch. Now you realize they are there to mask a deeper, more unpleasant smell. It's the scent of stale, overused water, a scent of too many bodies into smaller space. A new group of men arrives, loud and boisterous. Without a moment's hesitation, they strip off their muddy clothes and cannonball into the nearest tub, sending a great wave of murky water sloshing over the side. No one suggests that perhaps the water should be changed before a new group gets in. This leads you to a horrifying, dawning realization. This water, this human soup you are sitting in, is almost certainly not changed on a daily basis. You look around for any sign of drainage or fresh water being piped in. You see none. There are the boys who stoke the fires, and the servants who bring fresh, hot water in buckets to top up the tubs or for specialized services like the barber's shave, but there is no great flushing of the system. The main body of water in these vats is a precious and expensive commodity. To drain a tub meant losing all that heated water. To refill it meant hauling dozens, if not hundreds, of buckets from the well. And to heat it all up again would take a massive amount of firewood and a great deal of time. From the keeper's perspective, fresh water was a significant expense. Therefore the water was changed as infrequently as possible. How infrequently? That is the disgusting, unanswerable question. Days. A week. The mind shudders to think. Contemporary accounts and poems often joke about the filth of the stewhouse water. One writer described the water as being so thick you could write your name in it. While likely an exaggeration for comic effect, it points to a well-known truth: the baths were dirty. Really? Profoundly, disgustingly dirty. The weaver from your tub, seeming to read your mind, chuckles. Don't think too hard about it, he advises. Just pretend it's good English mud. Good for the complexion. HES joking, but his casual acceptance is telling. For the average customer, this was just the way things were. The concept of private, clean, running water was a luxury reserved for the king and the highest nobility. For everyone else, water was communal, whether it was the village well or the Southwark stew. This single fact, the shared, infrequently changed water, is the key to understanding why the stews, intended as places of cleansing, were actually potent vectors of disease. It wasn't just the venereal diseases passed through intimate contact, it was everything else. Skin infections, lice, fleas, and intestinal parasites would have thrived in this environment. A man with a stomach ailment could easily contaminate the water, infecting everyone else who soaked after him. A simple skin infection contracted in the bath could easily turn septic and become a fatal illness. Some historians debate the full extent of the public health impact, suggesting that the human immune system in the Middle Ages was more robust, more accustomed to a level of filth that would hospitalize a modern person. This theory of paleoimmunity is controversial, but it attempts to explain how people survived in a world with no concept of microbial hygiene. Still, the overwhelming evidence suggests that taking a bath in a public stew was a significant health risk. You were literally swimming in a petri dish of your neighbor's ailments. You suddenly feel an overwhelming urge to get out. The warmth of the water no longer feels comforting, it feels sinister. The laughter around you sounds less like revelry and more like the blissful ignorance of people slow cooking in a bacterial broth. The entire enterprise now seems like a form of collective madness. You look at the fresh arrivals, splashing happily in the tub they just joined. They are washing the dirt of the road from their bodies, blissfully unaware that they are trading it for a far more intimate, and potentially far more dangerous kind of grime. The great, secret joke of the Southwark stews is that you almost certainly leave dirtier than you arrived. You stand up, the mucky water sluicing off your body, and you make your way to the edge of the tub, eager to escape the water's dirty secret. As you clamber out of the tub, your skin feeling slick and vaguely unclean, you spot the barber surgeon again. He isn't shaving anyone or pulling teeth now. HES administering a different kind of health treatment, one that makes blood-missing look positively benign. The merchant is sitting on a stool, his back exposed. The barber surgeon takes a small glass cup, about the size of a small apple. He holds a piece of flaming linen inside the cup for a moment to heat the air, then swiftly places the open mouth of the cup onto the merchant's fleshy back. As the air inside the cup cools, it creates a powerful vacuum, sucking the man's skin and flesh up into the glass. The skin turns a dark, angry red and bulges nerve-ingum. The merchant groans. The barber surgeon nods sagely, as if this is a clear sign of a successful procedure. He then places another cup, and another, until the man's back is dotted with these grotesque glass bubbles. This, you learn, is another popular treatment based on humoral theory. The idea is that the suction draws bad blood or stagnant humors up to the surface of the body, away from the vital organs where they might cause disease. It's supposed to relieve pain, reduce inflammation, and restore balance. To you, it looks like a form of medieval torture that people are paying good money for. Sometimes after the cups are removed, the barber surgeon would take a small lance and prick the swollen, red skin, a practice known as wet cupping. This would release a small amount of dark, congealed-looking blood, which was seen as physical proof that the bad humors had been successfully purged from the body. You are morbidly glad the merchant seems to be undergoing the dry version. The very idea of a deep clean in this environment is a tragicomede. Here, in a room thick with airborne and waterborne contaminants, men are willingly having their skin broken and their blood let in the name of wellness. It's a perfect storm of good intentions and bad science. Every treatment offered, from the simple hot bath to the complex and invasive bloodletting, is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how the human body and disease actually work. And the wellness menu doesn't stop there. For those with digestive complaints, a common ailment in an era of questionable food safety, the stews offered another service: enemas. You don't see one being administered, for which you are profoundly grateful, but you know they are available. Using a long-nozzled metal syringe called a sea lister, a bath attendant would administer a cleansing concoction of warm water, salt, and various herbs. This was considered a vital method for purging the lower intestine of whatever was thought to be causing trouble down there. Records show that some high-ranking nobles had custom-made silver clusters, turning even this most intimate procedure into a status symbol. The stew house, therefore, is not just a spa, it's a clinic. But it's a clinic operating on a set of principles that are almost perfectly inverted from the truth. They believe that opening the body up in a dirty environment is cleansing. They believe that removing the body's own fluids is healing. They believe that the best way to cure an illness is to subject the body to a series of stressful, invasive, and often painful procedures. Historians often struggle with how to frame this. Is it a story of ignorance and barbarism? Or is it a story of people doing their best with the knowledge they had? The consensus leans towards the latter. These weren't foolish people. The barber surgeon applying the cuts is likely a skilled and respected practitioner. His patient, the merchant, is a successful man of the world. They are participating in a system of medicine that had been dominant for over 1,000 years, stretching back to the ancient Greeks. They had no reason to doubt it. They were simply wrong. You dry yourself with a rough linen towel, the feeling of the soapy water still clinging to your skin. You feel less clean, less healthy, and certainly less balanced than when you arrived. You have just experienced the medieval version of a spa day, and it has been a journey through a medical funhouse, where every treatment seems designed to make you sicker. You get dressed as quickly as you can, eager to leave this temple of questionable wellness behind. As you lace up your tunic, feeling the rough, familiar fabric against your skin, you decide to linger for a while, to be a fly on the damp wall. You want to understand the full rhythm of this place, not just as a customer, but as an observer of its daily life. You find a relatively dry bench near the entrance, a place where you can watch the gears of the stew house turn, from the first light of dawn to the last drunken departure at night. The day begins long before the first customer arrives. You see it in your mind's eye, a projection of the day's labor. At dawn, a young boy, the same one who serves the pies, would be the first to rise. His first job is the most crucial, the fire. He shuffles to the great brick furnaces that heat the cauldrons, his breath misting in the cold morning air. He must clear out the old ashes and coax a new flame to life. The entire business, the very heat that is its lifeblood, depends on his small, diligent efforts. As the fires roar to life, the other staff begin to stir. The keepers, both male and female attendants, start their chores. They sweep the floors, slick with the previous day's grime. They collect the discarded wooden cups and platters, and they face the grim task of dealing with the tubs. While a full water change is rare, they would at least skim the surface, removing the most obvious debris, the floating crusts of bread, the stray leaves of herbs, anything else that has risen to the top overnight. It's a thankless Sisyphean task. The women, the geese, also have a routine. They are not lolling about in silken sheets. Their mornings are for mending their clothes, for washing what little they own, for trying to maintain some semblance of personal order in a life that is fundamentally chaotic. There's a certain solidarity among them, a community born of shared hardship. You imagine them sharing stories, complaining about clients, offering each other advice. It's a hidden world, away from the male gaze of the main bathing hall. Some historians speculate about the nature of these female relationships, whether they were purely practical or formed deeper bonds of friendship and support in a world that offered them so little. By mid-morning, the water is hot, and the first customers arrive. These are often the businessmen, the merchants like the ones you saw haggling over wool. They come for a quick soak and a bit of networking before the day gets too busy. The atmosphere is relatively subdued, professional even. As midday approaches, the mood shifts. The lunch crowd arrives. Craftsmen taking a break from their workshops, clerks escaping their desks. This is when the food and drink service kicks into high gear. The noise level rises. The air gets thicker with steam and the smell of hot pies. This is the Bathish in its prime, a bustling, chaotic hub of social activity. The late afternoon is a strange, liminal time. The lunch crowd has departed, but the evening revelers have not yet arrived. The stew house might fall into a brief lull. The staff take a moment to rest. The fires are banked. The women retreat to their quarters. It's the quiet breath between the day's chaos and the night's debauchery. Then, as dusk falls, the third wave of customers appears. This is the evening crowd, and they are here for one thing: pleasure. They are soldiers with fresh pay, young apprentices looking for adventure, and men of all classes, seeking escape and companionship. The ale and wine flow freely. The laughter is louder, the jokes are BAWDer, the music, if there is any, is more raucous. The pretense of being here for a simple bath has all but vanished. This is the time when the stew house fully embraces its reputation as a den of iniquity. The keeper is on high alert, watching for trouble, his role as bouncer becoming more important than his role as host. Finally, late into the night, the last customers are ushered out. The city's curfew bell, the compline, has rung, and by law the stews must close their doors. The staff are left to deal with the aftermath. The fires are damped down, the debris is cleared, and the room is prepared for the cycle to begin all over again. The women, exhausted from a long day, a night of labor, of smiling through unwanted advances, of breathing the thick, steamy air, finally retreat to their small rooms above the bathish. They are tenants in a building they can never truly leave, their lives dictated by the ringing of bells and the endless, predictable cycle of male desire. You see now that the stew house is not just a place, it's a relentless, grinding machine, and these people are its gears, turning from dawn until long after dark. The relative peace of your observational perch is shattered by a sudden commotion at the door. It's not the boisterous arrival of new customers. This is different. The door is flung open, and in stride to men in official-looking livery. They are beadles, the low-ranking law enforcement officers of the City of London. They carry stout wooden staves and expressions of grim authority. The festive atmosphere in the stew house freezes, laughter dies in throats. The only sound is the sloshing of water and the crackle of the furnace. The keeper of the stew rushes forward, his face a mask of professional concern, trying to intercept them. "Gentlemen, what seems to be the trouble?" "No problem, keeper," the head beadle says, his voice loud enough for the whole room to hear. "Just a routine inspection, making sure the bishop's rules are being followed, and the king's peace is being kept." He pointedly ignores the keeper and lets his gaze sweep across the room, lingering on the tubs filled with nervous, half-naked men. This is a raid, or, more accurately, a show of force, and it highlights the incredibly complex and fraught relationship between the liberty of the clink and the City of London proper. Just across the river, Southwark might be the bishop's domain, but the city authorities never fully accepted its independence. They saw it as a source of crime and disorder that constantly threatened to spill over the bridge. So, from time to time, they would send the beadles over to make a point, to remind everyone who was really in charge. The legality of these raids was, and still is, a subject of intense historical debate. Did the City of London have any real jurisdiction here? Or were they overstepping their bounds, flexing their muscles in the bishop's territory? It was a power struggle played out not in the courtroom, but right here, in the steam and chaos of a Bathe. The beadles begin their inspection. They stalk through the room, peering into the tubs. They aren't really looking for anything specific. They are performing. Their presence is the message. They are a physical reminder that the law exists, even here, They're either men gambling with dice, who quickly hide their game. They stare down a man who has had too much to drink, daring him to cause trouble. Then, one of the beadles points his staff at one of the women. "You," he barks. "What's your name? Are you registered to work in this house?" The woman, terrified, stammers her name. The keeper quickly steps in. "She is, sir. All my girls are proper and accounted for, as per the ordinances." The beadle ignores him, continuing to intimidate the woman. "I've heard reports of stolen goods being fenced in the stews. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? It's pure harassment. They are using the women, the most vulnerable people in the room, to assert their authority." The scene is incredibly tense. The men in the tubs, who moments before were laughing and drinking, are now silent, avoiding eye contact. They are powerful merchants and craftsmen, but in this moment, stripped of their clothes and their status, they are just as vulnerable as anyone else. They don't want to be caught in the middle of a jurisdictional dispute. After a few more minutes of this theatrical intimidation, the beadles seem satisfied. They have made their point. The head beadle turns to the keeper. "See that you run a clean house, keeper," he says, the word clean dripping with ironic meaning. "We'll be back." And then, as quickly as they arrived, they are gone. The moment the door closes, a collective sigh of relief seems to run through the room. The tense silence is broken, and conversations start up again, albeit in more subdued tones. The keeper wipes a bead of sweat from his brow, not just managing customers but navigating the treacherous political landscape. A raid like this is bad for business. It scares the clientele, especially the wealthy, respectable ones who have the most to lose from being associated with any kind of trouble. The incident is a stark reminder that the liberty of Southwark is a fragile thing. It exists in a state of permanent tension with the formal power of London. It's a space that is both outside the law and constantly under its shadow. The men in the tubs might feel like they are in a different world, a world without rules, but that is an illusion. The real world, with its beadles and its staves and its power struggles, can crash through the door at any moment. The tension from the beadles' raid eventually dissipates, replaced by the usual hum of the stew house. But the fragility of this world has been exposed. It's a place built on pleasure and profit, but it rests on a foundation of social resentment. And sometimes that resentment boils over. You don't have to imagine it. Let's step forward in time just for a moment, to a hot summer day in 1381. The air in London is not just thick with the usual smells of smoke and mud, it's thick with rebellion. An army of commoners, led by a man named Wat Tyler, has marched on the city. They are protesting a new poll tax, but their grievances run much deeper. They are rising up against the perceived corruption of the church, the greed of the landlords, and the injustice of the ruling class. They are the 99% of their day, and they are angry. And where do they direct their anger? At the symbols of the power that oppresses them. They storm the Tower of London. They hunt down the Archbishop of Canterbury. And they cross London Bridge into Southwark, their minds set on a very specific target, the stews. You are there, swept along with the furious crowd. The mood is not festive, like the bathers you've seen. It's a righteous fury. The rebels, mostly peasants and artisans from Kent and Essex, see the stews as the physical embodiment of the moral rot at the heart of the kingdom. They are owned by a wealthy bishop. They are frequented by the corrupt merchants and officials who exploit the poor. And they are a place of flagrant sin, a mockery of the piety the church preaches. Destroying the stews is not just an act of vandalism, it's an act of moral cleansing. They fall upon the bankside establishments with a terrifying ferocity. You hear the splintering of wood as they kick down the doors of the Swan and the Bell. They smash the great wooden tubs with axes, the precious hot water flooding out into the muddy street. They break the furniture, tear down the cheerful painted signs, and set the buildings ablaze. The steam that usually seeps from the doors is replaced by thick, black smoke. The keepers and the women flee in terror. This is not a targeted raid by a few beetles. This is a full-blown popular uprising. The crowd is not interested in rules or jurisdictions. They are interested in destruction. A particularly interesting detail recorded by chroniclers of the time is that the rebels were not interested in looting. One account tells of a man who tried to steal a silver platter from one of the burning stews. The crowd turned on him immediately, declaring that they were zealots for truth and justice, not thieves, and threw him into the fire with his loot. This wasn't about personal enrichment. It was about making a statement. The question that has fascinated historians for centuries is, why this specific target? Why, out of all the symbols of corruption in London, did the stews provoke such a violent and specific rage? Some argue it was purely about their connection to the bishop and the church. Others believe it was a more complex social anger. Perhaps the rebels, many of whom were poor and struggling, resented a place of such flagrant luxury and idleness, a lashing out at the most visible and convenient symbol of sin. And what about the women? The rebels' attitude towards them is ambiguous. Some accounts suggest the women weren't audited along with the buildings, seen as part of the sinful establishment. Other interpretations suggest the rebels may have seen the women as fellow victims of the system, exploited by the same powerful men they were fighting against. The historical record is silent on their immediate fate during the riots. Did they escape? Were they harmed? It's a chilling blank in the story. You stand back and watch the flames lick at the sky. The heat is intense. The smell of burning wood mixes with the scent of spilled ale and stagnant bathwater. The Southwark stews, that seemingly permanent fixture of London life, are being reduced to ash and rubble. It is a powerful, terrifying demonstration of how quickly the social order can be upended. The same institution that provided a safety valve for the city's pressures has just become a casualty of those pressures boiling over. The riot will eventually be crushed, and the stews will, inevitably, be rebuilt. The demand is too high, the profits too great, but for one fiery, violent day, the common people of England passed their judgment on the bishop's brothels, and their verdict was guilty. You return to the relative calm of your own time, the echoes of the riot fading. The stews were rebuilt, the tubs were filled, then business resumed. For over a century, the cycle of pleasure, profit, and peril continued. But a new kind of threat was on the horizon, one far more devastating than any riot, and one that the bathhouses were uniquely, terrifyingly equipped to amplify. It arrived in the autumn of 1348, a silent, unseen passenger on the merchant ships. We call it the Black Death. Imagine the stew house on a normal afternoon, just before the plague takes hold. The tubs are full, the ale is flowing, the air is thick with steam and conversation. It is a hub of connection, a place where people from all over the city and the surrounding countryside come together, sharing the same air, the same food, the same water. Now, imagine one of those people, a traveller just arrived in London, has a slight cough. He feels a little warm. He chalks it up to the chill of the road and sinks gratefully into the hot tub. In that moment, the stew house transforms from a social hub into a biological bomb. The plague was spread by two primary means. The bubonic form was transmitted by the bites of fleas from infected rats. The pneumonic form, far more virulent, could be transmitted directly from person to person through respiratory droplets by coughing, sneezing, or even just breathing in close proximity. The stew house, with its hot, humid, crowded, and poorly ventilated space, was a near-perfect environment for the pneumonic plague to spread. You watch as the unsuspecting traveller coughs into the steam. The tiny, deadly droplets hang in the thick, wet air, easily inhaled by the man soaking next to him. He shares a mug of ale with a friend, passing the infection along with the drink. The woman who scrubs his back leans close, breathing the same air, and then moves on to her next client, becoming an unwitting vector of the disease. The fleas on the rats that scurry in the walls, fat and happy from the kitchen scraps, find a warm, new home in the discarded clothes on the pegs. Within days, the city begins to fall sick, and the people who visited the stews are among the first to show the horrifying symptoms: the high fever, the weakness, and the telltale buboes, the painful, swollen lymph nodes in the groin, armpits, and neck that gave the plague its name. Suddenly, the public bathhouse is no longer seen as a place of health and relaxation. It's seen as a death trap. The very things that made it so appealing, the warmth, the water, the close company, are now rightly identified as sources of immense danger. The public's attitude towards the stews likely soured with terrifying speed. Who would dare to soak in a tub where a sick man might have been just hours before? Who would want to share a cup or a conversation or a pool of stagnant water when the price might be a swift and agonizing death? The keepers must have watched their businesses collapse almost overnight. The fires would have cooled, the tubs would have emptied. The laughter and the music would have been replaced by an eerie silence, broken only by the distant, constant ringing of the death cart bells. The women, the Winchester Geese, would have been in a particularly desperate situation. Their livelihood vanished, and they were wrapped in a district that was now a recognized hotspot of contagion. The question of whether authorities officially closed the stews during major plague outbreaks is a point of debate among historians. Formal closure orders were not always necessary. Fear was a much more effective regulator. Business would have simply ceased as the population either fled the city or locked themselves in their homes. Some records from later plague outbreaks in the 16th and 17th centuries shows specific orders to close hothouses and other places of public assembly to prevent the spread of infection. It's highly likely that similar, if less formally documented, measures or simple economic collapse occurred during the Black Death. The plague didn't destroy the stews permanently. London's population eventually recovered, and with it, the demand for public bathing and its associated pleasures. But the experience left a deep psychological scar. The association between public bathing and disease was now burned into the collective consciousness. For centuries to come, every new outbreak of the plague would have brought with it a renewed suspicion of places like the Southwark stews. The water, which had always been a little dirty, now seemed truly deadly. The people broth was no longer a joke, it was a terrifying possibility. The great pestilence had revealed the dark, biological truth that had been lurking in the murky water all along. The Black Death was a recurring nightmare, but its terror was familiar. London learned to live with its periodic, devastating visits. But in the late 15th and early 16th centuries, a new and frightening sickness began to spread through Europe, a shadow that would fall particularly hard on the Southwark stews. It came from the Americas, an unwelcome souvenir brought back by the first European explorers. The French called it the Neapolitan disease. The Italians called it the French disease. It became known as the Great Pox. Today, we know it as syphilis. Unlike the plague, which killed quickly and indiscriminately, the pox was a slow, insidious, and deeply personal affliction. And its primary mode of transmission meant that the stews were, once again, ground zero. The disease announced itself with a chancre, followed by a horrifying full-body rash, fever, and sore throat. But that was just the beginning. In its later stages, it could cause debilitating joint pain, blindness, dementia, and a gruesome condition where the soft tissues of the face, particularly the nose, would literally rot away. To have no nose became a visible, public sign of a secret, shameful disease. You are back in the stew house, but the atmosphere has changed. The old carefree hedonism is tinged with a new kind of fear. Men look at the women and at each other with a new suspicion. A simple rash or a sore throat, once a minor annoyance, is now a cause for panic. The bite of the Winchester Goose had always been a risk, but the old ailments were, for the most part, treatable or at least manageable. The pox was a life sentence. The treatments for it were as horrific as the disease itself. The most popular and most dangerous remedy was mercury. Patients would be salivated, a process where they were covered in mercury-laced ointments, and then seated in a heated chamber or tub, a hothouse, to sweat. The stew houses, with their existing infrastructure for heat and steam, were repurposed as clinics for this new disease. The goal was to make the patients wet and drool profusely, which was believed to purge the venom of the pox from the body. Patients would lose teeth, their gums would recede, and many suffered from severe, often fatal, mercury poisoning. The cure was, in many cases, as deadly as the disease. Imagine the scene. In one tub, men are still trying to enjoy a traditional bath, drinking and socializing. In another, a group of pale, gaunt figures are sweating out their mercury treatment, their bodies racked with tremors, the metallic smell of the poison mixing with the steam. The stew house has become a place of profound cognitive dissonance, a place where pleasure and agonizing medical treatment exist side by side. This new disease had a profound impact on public opinion. While prostitution had always been seen as sinful, the arrival of the pox framed it as a direct threat to the nation's health. It was no longer just a moral failing, it was a biological one. The women of the stews, once seen as a necessary evil, were increasingly depicted in popular pamphlets and sermons as monstrous, corrupted vessels of disease, sent to poison the good men of England. The blame, as it so often does, fell squarely on the women, not on the men who visited them. The historical debate here centers on how quickly this shift in attitude occurred. Did the arrival of the pox cause an immediate crash in the stew's popularity? Or was it a slower burn, a gradual erosion of public trust over decades? The evidence suggests the latter. The desire for companionship and pleasure is a powerful one, and for many, the risk was still worth taking. But the seed of doubt had been planted. The stews were now irrevocably associated with the terrifying, disfiguring, and incurable disease. You see a man leaving the stew house, pulling his cloak up to hide the lower half of his face. He is missing a nose, a clear sign of his affliction. He is a walking billboard for the dangers of this place. The carefree days of the medieval Baths are officially over. But it's brutal now, laced with a new and specific paranoia. The pox has cast a long, dark shadow over Southwark, and it is a shadow from which the stews will never truly emerge. The very idea of communal bathing, once a cornerstone of social life, is becoming synonymous not with cleanliness, but with a slow creeping, invisible decay. The shadows of plague and pox have been gathering over the stews for decades, eroding their popularity and cementing their reputation as dens of disease rather than places of cleansing. But the final death blow will not come from a physician. It will come from a king with a notoriously fragile ego, a desperate need for a male heir, and a newfound, fervent sense of religious morality. The king is Henry VII. You are now in the 1530 seconds. England is in the midst of a religious and political earthquake. Henry, in his quest to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon and Mary Anne Boleyn, has broken with the Catholic Church in Rome. He has declared himself the supreme head of the Church of England. This is the English Reformation, a top-down revolution that will change the face of the country forever. And as part of his new role as the nation's spiritual leader, Henry begins a sweeping campaign of moral and religious reform. He starts by dissolving the monasteries. The vast wealth and land of the monastic orders are seized by the crown. This is partly a religious act, aimed at what he sees as the corruption and idolatry of the monasteries, but it is also, quite transparently, a massive cash grab. With the monasteries gone, Henry turns his attention to other institutions he deems morally suspect, and his gaze falls upon the steamy, sinful enclave of Southwark. The irony is staggering. For centuries the stews have been protected and licensed by a powerful churchman, the Bishop of Winchester. But now the king has supplanted the Pope, and by extension all his bishops. The old protections are meaningless. The bishop's authority, once absolute in the liberty of the clink, is now subject to the king's will. In 1546, late in his reign, Henry and his council issue a royal proclamation. You can almost hear the herald's voice, reading the decree in the public squares of London. The language is stern and righteous. It speaks of the abominable and detestable sin of lechery. It condemns the great mischiefs and inconveniences that arise from the said stews. It talks of the need to protect the honor of the realm and the health of the king's subjects. The proclamation declares that all stew houses are to be shut down forever. The women who work there are ordered to leave, and the keepers are forbidden from plying their trade, upon pain of a hefty fine and imprisonment. The king's motivations, as always, are a complex soup of piety, politics, and personal interest. This is a point of great debate for historians. Was Henry genuinely overcome with a fit of moral piety in his old age? Had he truly come to believe that the stews were a stain on the soul of his new English church? It's possible. He was, by all accounts, a genuinely religious man, albeit one whose faith conveniently aligned with his political and personal desires. Or was it a more calculated political move? By closing the stews, Henry could present himself as a great moral reformer, a Protestant king cleansing his realm of popish corruption. The fact that the stews were so famously associated with a Catholic bishop made them an easy and symbolic target. It was a way to publicly humiliate the old order and demonstrate the power of the new one. There may have been a public health motive as well. The Great Pox was still raging. Closing the stews could be framed as a decisive public health measure, a king protecting his people from a foreign contagion. It was good PR, a way to show that he was a caring and responsible monarch. Whatever the primary reason, the effect was immediate and final. The king's word was law. The proclamation was not a suggestion, it was an order. The ancient, resilient institution of the Southwark stews, which had survived riots, plagues, and centuries of moral condemnation, was to be extinguished with the stroke of a royal pen. The liberty of the clink, that strange pocket of tolerated sin, was about to be brought firmly under the heel of the crown. The party, it seemed, was finally over. The king had decided it was time for everyone to get out of the tub. The royal proclamation is not just a piece of paper. It has teeth. And you are there to witness the final, sad act of the Southwark stews. The Beadles return, but this time they are not here for a performative raid. They are here to enforce the king's will. They move from door to door along Bankside, nailing the official decree to the doors of the Swan. The bell, the cardinal's hat, and all the others. The wooden signs that once advertised a world of pleasure are now marked with the stern words of the Lord of the Lord of the Lord. The keepers, who for so long had been the masters of their own small kingdoms, are now powerless. You see one of them, a man who reminds you of the sharp-eyed keeper you saw earlier, arguing with an official. He gestures wildly, pleading. He has a business to run, a family to feed. But his arguments fall on deaf ears. The official simply points to the royal seal on the parchment. There is no appeal. The discussion is over. The keeper slumps in defeat, the keys on his belt jingling uselessly. His reign is over. Then come the women. They emerge from the now shuttered houses, blinking in the daylight, carrying small bundles of their meager possessions. The Winchester Geese are being evicted. The system that had, for better or for worse, provided them with a roof over their heads and a regulated, if exploitative, place of work, has just been dismantled. They are now officially unemployed and unofficially homeless. They gather in small, bewildered groups on the muddy street. Where are they supposed to go? What are they supposed to do? The king's proclamation, in its righteous seal, made no provision for them. It simply cast them out. The law was concerned with erasing the sin, not with caring for the sinners. This is the great, unanswered question that hangs over the closure of the stews, a question that historians still grapple with. What happened to the last generation of Winchester Geese? The historical record is tragically silent on this point. There was no social safety net, no retraining program, no state-sponsored housing. They were simply pushed out of their licensed profession and into a world that was even more dangerous. It's likely their fates were varied and grim. Some may have tried to continue their trade illegally, moving into the back alleys and tenements of London, where they would have no protection from the keeper and no recourse against violent clients. They would be more vulnerable than ever before. Some may have tried to find other work, but their past would have followed them. What respectable household would hire a former worker? They were marked women, their reputation preceding them. Some, inevitably, would have fallen into desperate poverty, begging on the streets. Some may have ended up in Bridewell, the city's new house of correction for disorderly women, where they would be subjected to forced labor and harsh discipline. You watch one young woman, her face a mixture of fear and defiance. She stares back at the bolted door of the stew house, the only home she has known for years. Then she pulls her shawl tight around her shoulders, turns her back on Bankside, and walks towards London Bridge, her future a complete and terrifying unknown. The last goose is flying, but she has nowhere to land. The closure of the stews marks the end of an era. It is the end of a unique and deeply strange social experiment, a centuries-long attempt to regulate and contain human desire. Henry V. I may have thought he was cleansing his kingdom of a moral stain. But what he really did was take a highly visible, regulated, and profitable system and drop to the ground, into the shadows. Prostitution didn't disappear from London. It just became more dangerous, more desperate, and less controlled. The king had torn down the houses, but he had done nothing to address the reasons people sought them out in the first place. The demand remained, and in the dark alleys of the city, a new, unregulated supply would inevitably rise to meet it. The doors of the stews are shuttered, the fires are cold, and the Winchester Geese have flown. But does a place so steeped in memory, so central to the life of a city for so long, ever truly disappear? You find yourself standing on the same ground on the south bank of the Thames, but centuries have passed. The world has been rebuilt a dozen times over. The mud of Southwark has been paved, the timber-framed houses replaced by brick and glass. Can you still find the ghosts of the stews in the streets of modern London? You stand near where the southern end of the old London Bridge would have been, close to Southwark Cathedral. This is the heart of the old liberty of the Clink. The air no longer smells of tanneries and breweries, but of traffic fumes and roasting coffee from a nearby cafe. The noise is not of horses and carts, but of sirens and the rumble of the underground trains beneath your feet. And yet, if you look closely, the echoes are there. You walk down a narrow alleyway, and its name catches your eye: Cardinal Cap Alley. The name is a direct, unbroken link to the past. This alley is named after the Cardinal's hat, one of the most famous of the original stew houses. You stop and touch the old brick wall. It's not the original building, of course, but for a moment, standing in an alley that still bears the name of a medieval brothel. The centuries feel very thin. You can almost hear the faint echo of laughter, the ghost of a raunchy song. A little further on, you find another street sign, Clink Street. This is the street that gave the Liberty and subsequently any prison its nickname. The original Clink prison, also under the jurisdiction of the Bishop of Winchester, stood here. It was where he locked up heretics, debtors, and anyone who broke the rules of his liberty, including, sometimes, the very women who worked in his stews. A museum now stands on the site, a tourist attraction dedicated to the history of the prison, a sanitized echo of a place of real human suffering. The greatest irony is the site of the Bishop of Winchester's palace. The magnificent London residence that once stood as a symbol of the church's power is now a ruin. Only a single wall and a beautiful rose window remain, standing silently in the middle of a modern development. And all around it, what do you find? Pubs. Dozens of them. The Anchor, the Old Themyscira Inn. The Anchor, the Old Themyscira Inn. Places where people still gather to drink, to socialize, to escape their working day. The names and the architecture have changed, but the fundamental purpose of the area as a place of licensed leisure remains strangely intact. The South Bank is still London's playground. But where were the stews themselves? The exact locations are a subject of endless fascination and debate for archaeologists and historians. The area was heavily bombed during World War II and extensively redeveloped afterwards. Finding precise foundations is incredibly difficult. However, during the construction of the Jubilee Line extension for the London Underground in the 1992, archaeologists had a unique opportunity. They conducted a massive dig in the area, and they found the remains of the Bishop's Palace. They found animal bones from the bear baiting pits. And in the area along Bankside where the stews were known to have been, they found unusually high concentrations of pins, which women used to fasten their clothing on veils. They found the remains of drinking vessels and fragments of imported pottery, suggesting a place of heist at a revelry. They even found small, personal items, like a simple ring or a leather shoe, lost in the mud 400 years ago. Each object is a ghost, a tangible link to a forgotten life. Standing here now on the clean, modern promenade, you look out over the Thames. The Globe Theatre, a faithful reconstruction of Shakespeare's playhouse, stands nearby, another testament to the area's history as a centre for entertainment. It's easy to forget that this whole district, this vibrant cultural hub, was built on a foundation of regulated sin managed by the church. It's a history that is both hidden in plain sight and buried deep beneath your feet. But their legacy is woven into the very fabric of the city, in the names of the alleys, in the ruins of the palace, and in the unspoken, enduring character of a neighborhood that has always known how to have a good time. The ghosts of the Winchester Geese are quiet now, but if you listen carefully, in the pause between the rumble of a train and the laughter from a pub, you might just be able to hear them whisper their stories on the wind. And so, the story of the stews dissolves, like steam into the night air. The sounds of Southwark fade, the boisterous laughter and the whispered deals all returning to the silence of the past. You can feel that world receding now, its sharp edges softening as you drift further away into a deeper, more peaceful quiet. There is nothing left to analyze, nothing to question. The journey is over. All that remains is the gentle, fleeting sensation of rest. Imagine yourself now, not in a murky wooden tub, but in a calm, clear, and perfectly still pool of water. The water is impossibly soft, holding you effortlessly. It is the perfect temperature, a soothing warmth that seems to emanate from within you, loosening every muscle, calming every thought. There is no one else here. This place is yours alone. You can feel the gentle support of the water beneath you, a feeling of absolute safety, of being completely held. The surface is like dark glass, reflecting a sky filled with soft, distant stars. Each star is a thought, a memory from the day, but they are miles away now, their light faint and gentle, unable to disturb the deep peace of your private lagoon. You don't need to swim, you don't need to float. You are resting in the heart of the stillness, a quiet observer of your own deepening calm. The story has been told, and now there is only this perfect, silent, and peaceful moment just for you. Our journey together tonight ends here, in this quiet place. Should you need another tale to accompany you further into rest, my library of stories is always open for you. May your dreams be kind. Good night.